Yo, thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. It's 10:13 a.m. Pacific time. It's December 11th of 2025. Let's begin. Why we actually should worry about Gen Z. Gen Z is accused of a lot of things. We're too emotional snowflakes. We can't order drinks at the bar. We're not partying, and we can't make small talk. So it's no wonder why I tend to find myself standing in a generation's lead defense attorney at the dinner table with family, particularly during this season of giving. But what if there's some truth to all this? Could Gen Z ethical codes and moral values really be diverging from previous generations? And what does it mean for society if it turns out that young people really are more individualistic and gasp, maybe even coddled? Gen Z faces a lot more antisocial, individualistic, and reactionary than older generations. New research from the Survey Center on American Life suggests there may actually be some truth to this. Younger people today are more morality and ethics through an individual lens instead of a social contract or in a community context. There are divides within the generation too. Young women have more open views on things like drinking and casual sex than you young men do. It also suggests there may be something special about Gen Z right now. To answer these questions and determine if it should matter that Gen Z doesn't want to drink or have tough conversations, I spoke with Daniel A. Cox, the director of the American Enterprise Institute's Survey Center on American Life, where he focuses his research on Gen Z and American families. Whether you're talking about educational institutions, political institutions, or religious institutions, he told me, we need people to come into the places and not think that they're the most important person in the room. Our conversation has been edited for clarity. You have a new report out that dives into the moral and ethical views that young Americans hold today. What's the upshot? There's an individualistic orientation cutting across so many domains of life: education, religious life, family life, and views on marriage. And Americans seem to be judging everything in life by how well they meet our individual needs. Institutions and relationships only have purpose in helping us meet our own goals. That's been a fundamental shift. Now, you're seeing it in basically every aspect of American life, and it's particularly dramatic for young people. Young people want personality, personal flexibility, and it has percolated around in various sorts of cultural trends that you may have seen or heard of, like the idea of going no contact with friends, parents, siblings, or partners, and separating yourself from toxic people. The idea is that if these relationships are not your immediate needs, well, the correct approach is to end them. Instead of seeing that there is value in messy relationships and tending to them, wait. So we're essentially raising a generation of coddled narcissists and yappers who think they're main characters. That might not be how I would characterize it, but there is a fundamental truth in that when you tell young people and kids that they're all the most important thing, that they can be everything, that we kind of inculcate these values of personal achievement and betterment and improving yourself and knowing yourself. It's so much focus on these individual metrics as opposed to broader social needs. Research back this up. Yes, this generation has grown up understanding that they're different and need to take priority over anything else. It's the late Wabigon question. We've asked people to what extent their parents thought that they were average or not when they were growing up. For older Americans, most of them said that they thought their parents viewed them as average. But the youngest generation rejects this view. They're far more likely to think they are special, above average. Part of what's going on is parents today are investing so many more resources in their kids. They have smaller families, and as young people as children are getting so much more parental attention and resources. It's not as if this generation came out of the womb more narcissistic. It's that they are being raised in homes where their needs are often put above those of the family more broadly. And so that really shifts both the function of family life and how individual members see themselves in it. But how does that result in changing morals? What specifically are young people valuing differently? It creates an imperative for self-help and self-improvement that there is so much happening out there that it's really a tough world, and that I need an edge. I need to put all my resources, all my focus into improving myself. You see this in the dating context, whether there's manosphere adjacent types or not, but influential voices arguing for health, eating, working out, focusing on yourself. All these things are about sort of self-improvement for the point of dating, but none of them focus on building out a more robust social network, helping your friends seeing what you can do to be of service to your community. And those things are actually really important for well-being. To focus on a concept of cultural curation, that we want to curate our own experiences and our own ways of being, and that there being no right way to be. So you can be anything as opposed to sort of traditional when said no. There are institutions that will guide you and help form your conscious and help you live a life. How does that affect young people's views of sex, gender, and social? What's really interesting is to compare millennials and Gen Z. For millennials, there was a growing openness to different ways of living, different sexual identities. And when you think about sexual ethics, it was a sort of stark change from the boomer generation. Premarital sex between people of the same gender were all more acceptable for millennials. Some people thought that this would just continue with Gen Z, that we are seeing this long time trend towards growing of a variety of different personal behaviors, a variety of different sexual behaviors. But there's a problem when you don't have limits like that. Some of the most hedonistic, self-serving, and destructive behavior that ought probably to be judged as inappropriate or harmful gets caught up in the same. So, well, we need to be accepting of people who make different decisions. And so part of what Gen Z is wrestling with now is where to draw some of those lines. The desire for traditional lifestyles or living is really a reflection of this, wanting to draw some firmer lines about what's right and what's wrong. The difference is that a lot of this negotiating is happening online, since institutions are playing a far smaller role in laying out acceptable versus unacceptable behavior. So you see a lot of young people who are wrestling with questions of morality and ethics in places like Reddit, the I'm an asshole subreddit, for example. Young people are essentially crowdsourcing morals, but there's a tension there. The idea that we just all want to live completely unconstrained lives of personal freedom is running into young people seeing there are really downsides. In what other areas is Gen Z different? One aspect is free expression and free speech. We found that young women are most likely to say that you should feel free to express yourself even if it makes other people around you uncomfortable. Again, it's the idea that my individual needs trump any kind of social consequence. There's also a decline in drinking among Gen Z and the youngest adults. We've been aware of that trend for some time, but it turns out there's moral dimension to this. So many young men view drinking alcohol as morally wrong. 27% of young men ages 18 to 29 held that view compared to 14% of seniors 65 and older. It might be tied up with health conscious sort of lifestyle of young people. They view that there are businesses out there whose sole purpose is to sell products that aren't good for you. But it's also tied to the fact that alcohol has historically been a social lubricant. And this generation is also socializing less and differently than previous generations. It might also be that drinking alcohol is viewed as less of social activity at all among this generation. When I was growing up, going drinking, hanging out with friends, it wasn't an activity you did by yourself, even if you were at a pre-party or whatever you were doing. It was at its heart something that was communal. That may not be how Gen Z is understanding it. They don't necessarily see the social benefits of drinking and alcohol consumption. So I hear that often from Zoomers who are younger than me, but then I hear that this trend is tied to anxiety. It's too expensive to go out. It's too expensive to buy drinks. But it seems there's moral dimension underlying it. I get frustrated a little bit about some of the national discourse around this stuff because we, especially, but not just pollsters and social scientists, like to think that every generation is sort of having novel experiences. That whether it's due to technology or changes in culture or society, that this new things. But most generations of young people who, when they got their first job, were financially strapped or were aching it by have socialized like this. So I don't think it's a strong argument to sort of say, well, we can't go out because it's too expensive. What is actually happening is people don't want to go out because there's this sort of pronounced feeling of risk aversion. I've heard a lot about so-called rise in religious belief and prayer and spirituality among people. It was one of the big claims the right was making over the year to show a cultural swing. You've also done some research and thinking on this, and you're critical. Is it more about making an aesthetic out of religion? Yes, and like an identity market. And again, I don't want to in any way diminish the meaning of these activities. So if you download a prayer app on your phone or a meditation app, these may be things that are important to you and your well-being. In every sense, individual. Most people are not doing these activities in group settings. They're not going out and thinking about how they can be of service to their community or other members of their church or place of worship. They're not necessarily about serving or wanting to engage in educative activities. It's in a service of own well or personal growth. And so that's and so that is their defining feature. And it's kind of outgrowth the new iteration of self-help culture of the 90s. It becomes very difficult to have ingrained that this is how it should be to change your view of how prayer and religion should work. Do you find any ways to prove this difference? We asked a question in a survey. We asked about prayer, not just frequency of prayer. We know young people pray less than older, so we asked among those who do pray, are you praying for yourself or are you praying for someone else? And one of the biggest generation gaps that we see in this survey was when it came to praying for others. Only 46% of women who said they prayed on behalf of someone else compared to 72% of senior women. And that's just a huge gap. We do see gaps younger and older, but we see huge gaps among women. But aren't older people more likely to have more and deeper bonds and relationships and want to pray for other people? I think it's partly cultural. If you were raised in a church, you sort of realize and understand that you go in there. You're not the there. The experience is to be outward focused, to focus on needs of and commitment you have to the faith, to your religious leaders, to God, depending on your faith. In the case of prayer, you can necessarily pray for a family member, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent. You don't need to have kids, but I think you do need to have the experiences of learning and seeing this modeled in ways that make sense. So how does this all translate to people's political identities and views of life going forward? It explains why so many young people want to call themselves independents and are distrustful of political parties. The rise of individualism and the decline in institutional trust are the engines of populism. It really becomes difficult to govern when people are so mistrusting. It gets really difficult to assemble coalitions. You have this experience of their political party once they attain power. It becomes very difficult to keep it because People are just always dissatisfied and always distrustful. And you see it in views of political parties. The group that is most likely to say that they have an unfavorable opinion of both political parties is young men. So you have this political disaffection that becomes a hallmark of the politics of young people. Again, especially young men, because they're growing up in a time of political polarization, deep distrust, and individualism. Again, thank you for appreciating. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, let me know what you think. Follow me on Instagram, the Studio 11. Follow me on X, the Studio 2020. Alex Saber, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next one.